Good morning. My name is Malcolm Young, and welcome to the forum. We're so glad to see all of you today. We have churches going on a little bit longer upstairs, so we may be seeing people filtering in from up there. But Rebecca told me they're just singing the last hymn right now, so we'll see them very soon. I'm so excited about our guest today. Otis Taylor is a columnist at San Francisco Chronicle, and his columns are wonderful. I was even thinking when he arrived on BART today about your BART articles and what you notice, and he's got a wonderful sense of vision, just an acute sense for what's going on, a great way of conveying, just in very vivid language, what's happening in Oakland and what's going on there in every part of Oakland's life. So we're very grateful to have you here this morning.
Well, thank you very much.
I have two teenagers, and they're trying to figure out what to do with their life. And everybody always asks them that, what are you going to do when you grow up? What are you going to be? And I wonder, when you were a child, did you know that you were going to grow up to be a writer?
No. Do you want to know the real answer?
Yeah, I totally do.
I wanted to wear jeans and sneakers.
Yeah, well, yeah, I can get that.
Yeah, I didn't want to wear a suit. And you look great.
No, these are the world's most uncomfortable shoes. They were given to me by a person who was in the church, and they're like, these shoes are so painful for me, but I'll give them as a gift to you.
See, I don't want to run into that. So
yeah, right.
No, I like books growing up.
Yeah, me too.
And it just seemed the natural progression because in the mornings, before we went to school, my mom would have the Today Show on and the daily newspaper on the table. And her thing was she wanted my brother and I to eat breakfast every day with her or my dad, whichever one. I took the paper, my brother watched the television. My brother's a television anchor right now.
Oh, great.
I write for a newspaper. So I don't know if she planned it that way. We haven't asked her, but she's pretty happy with how things worked out.
What is your first consciousness of? I remember the Vietnam War, turning on the television and the news with the helicopters and the men in the uniforms and everything. What are some of your earliest recollections of news and media?
I think probably the first story that I followed top to bottom was 1986 Challenger.
Oh yeah, right.
So I had met Ronald McNair, who was one of the first black astronauts in space, and I had met him in New Jersey. So I grew up in New Jersey, and his speech just struck me because he was into books too.
Right.
So I was like, oh, cool, I could be an astronaut, but this guy turned out okay. He's really into books, and at that time I was trying to figure out what I was really into as I think I was 9 years old. But when that happened, since I knew a person or had met someone, I really followed that. And also, there was a school teacher on there. So,
right, exactly.
So we had done a module at my school about teachers going into space, and so that was something that I followed, and I saved clippings, and I think 25th anniversary. So I was working at a newspaper in South Carolina. Ronald McNair was from South Carolina, so I wrote the 25th anniversary of that.
Beautiful.
And I pulled up those clippings, and so it came full circle.
Yeah, definitely. What a wonderful thing, though, to become part of that, how people experience it today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, specifically because part of McNair's story is that he was a genius in biology and physics, and growing up, his local library wouldn't allow him to check books out at the library.
Right.
For the 25th anniversary of the Challenger, they renamed the library in his name.
This is like in Hawaii they say chicken skin. That's
so that was pretty cool. But I took him to task for that too. So.
Right. There's, I can imagine. I mean, so much of it is just so immersing yourself in that local scene, and I wonder what it's been like for you. Just like, how do you learn about Oakland and East Bay and the San Francisco Bay Area? Like, what were your first impressions of it, and how do you systematically go about learning what makes this place tick?
So, I think I'm at an advantage from some reporters because I like to hang out.
Yeah.
I'm not at home. I don't have teenagers yet.
Right.
So I like to go out and experience, the scene, if you will. And so with Oakland, I was already immersed because I liked the culture there. And so when it came time to interview for the job, I seemed like a good fit because I was already involved in the art scene. And interesting that we're going to talk about the Ghost Ship, but one of the first events I went to in Oakland, so I moved to San Francisco first and lived there for about 4 or 5 months. And it's probably a month or so that I was here, and the first thing I went to in Oakland was a warehouse party.
Wow. And maybe you could describe it a little bit. Like, what was it like there? One of my closest family friends was on his way to the party and was just kind of delayed and missed it that night. And I can't imagine the world without this young man. I baptized him when he was a baby.
Wow.
And so but I do wonder, what was it like inside? What was the feeling? We just had the elegy for Ghost Ship on Thursday night, and it was just such a blessing. I mean, this church was just filled with all sorts of different kinds of people, just mourning and in their own ways, and all sorts of different art exhibits, and everybody trying to give what they had to make this place beautiful for those beautiful people that were lost. But what was it like inside, and who did you meet there?
So I went, the first time I went to Ghost Ship was the day before I started at the Chronicle. And I probably would have been there much later if I didn't have to get to work by 8:30. I have a hard time waking up so early. But I liken it to, do you guys know what steampunk is?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah,
it's like Burning Man.
Yeah, it's when people say it's a labyrinth, that's exactly what it was. But it was also like an antique shop. And what I liked most about it was I like when people add character to their private spaces. Yeah. And so some people see it as junk. I saw it as just people like putting a part of themselves into their space. I did not venture upstairs because I knew if I went upstairs, I'd be there late. So, I have to have some limits, some self-control.
Exactly.
And but I was looking forward to going back on an evening that I could spend more time. And as a matter of fact, a friend of mine, I had agreed to go to that party, but I went out the night before, and so I needed an evening of rest.
Yeah. Wow, I'm so glad that you weren't there too. I mean, just life is like that sometimes. You just barely miss something that could have been terrible. Yeah. So maybe you can talk a little bit about the art scene in Oakland. Are there particular artists that you're especially excited about, or is it? I mean, it feels like gentrification in the city is just making it very difficult for artists here. I just wonder if you're experiencing the same kind of pressure in the East Bay.
I agree. So that's one of the reasons why moving to San Francisco, I really didn't feel a part of anything.
Yeah.
And so I found more often than not when I would be going out, I'd be taking BART to Oakland and BARTing back. Yeah. And then it seemed to me to make sense, why don't I just move to Oakland where rent is relatively cheaper. But what I found were there's these pockets, not just the warehouses, there's stores and the city center that have shows. How I go about finding art is who's performing, and you find one performer that you like, and then see who they performed with, and see who they performed with. But there's a lot of DJs, and that's fine. But what I've really gotten into is the music scene, like the guitar rock in Oakland and hip hop in Oakland. And the number one thing about it is that it's inclusive. It's come as you are. Yeah. There's no judgment of people. You don't have to wear a certain thing. Some people don't like to wear anything, which is which is fine.
Yeah.
Colorful hair, but you get to be a part of something while being who you are. You get to take the mask off. There's no pretending. And if you're pretending, somebody might want to call you out. But there were cultural events that you can't have anywhere else unless they're in these spaces.
Right.
Because if you try to say, I want to book a theater hall.
ballroom or-
Yeah, you got to pay X amount of dollars, or you can go to where one of your friends lives. Hey, I want to throw this production. And they're like, oh, that sounds cool. And hey, let's invite people over.
Yeah.
And that's usually how it is.
Can you give us like a list of like maybe 3 musicians that we should keep our eyes open for? Or?
Yes, Kid Trails
Uh-huh.
is scintillating. It's if you take Beach Boys, Sunny Pop, and then put it with, mix it with like the dourness of, I don't know, the Smiths.
Wow, that's great.
And you get like some really good guitar music, but they jam too. I like indie rock bands that have a little bit of the jam band DNA in them. Hazel English is probably my favorite right now. She's another Oakland transplant, but she's from Australia, and she said she didn't find her place in this world until she settled in Oakland.
Wow. And
the magnetism is there. I mean, I felt it, so
Yeah.
I can totally relate to that. One of the performers that just left, Toro Imoa, we didn't even realize what we had here. I mean, this guy is touring the globe. He has like 3 different artist personas, but as far as, I don't know if you listen to music, there's this subgenre of electronic music called chill wave. And so
Right.
we had, one of the founders hanging out in Oakland. I mean, you'd go to Blue Bottle and he'd be there at his laptop working. And I was like, wow, how cool is this? And people were just coming up to him, hey, can I take a picture? And he's like, sure, but just unassuming. But then when you realize this guy sells out, 10,000 seat venues, no problem across the world. That's amazing that he's just walking around with his dog and hanging out in a coffee shop. So
It's funny, my son's just so interested in kind of the Chicago music scene, and I'm like, he's like, Dad, I want to go to college there.
what is he like in Chicago?
He likes like the rap stars, like Chance the Rapper, and that all like the constellation of people who are wrapped up in that. And he's constantly like, Dad, you got to listen to this. You got to listen to this. And it's great. I mean, it's just like I don't know what I'm going to do when he's gone, because it brings so much new life into me. Because otherwise I don't know how to access it. And I like the way you describe it. You go to one concert, see who's playing with who, and that's how you make the connection.
Do you know, that's interesting. You mentioned Chicago, because there's this avant-garde, totally improvisational jazz scene that emanated
And he loves that too.
out of Chicago. And we had one of the horn players, Aaron Shelton, in Oakland for 12 years.
Yeah.
This guy redefined what West Coast jazz was. I mean, he was bringing people in from Finland, Switzerland, Germany to come play horns with him. He just moved to Copenhagen.
Oh, wow.
And so
Oh, my gosh.
we lost the treasure.
Yeah.
And to me, it felt like part of Oakland was ripped out for me, but he's like, it's going to be okay. You're going to be all right. But yeah, he came out of Chicago. So times I go to Chicago, it's on the west side. You have to find these you think they're like dirty clubs, but really this is where the jazz is, and like pretty seedy neighborhoods. But this venue here is just full of life and welcoming to anyone, and that's what arts are to me, just welcoming.
Yeah, exactly. I remember a friend of mine from high school became a rock star, and I remember the first time I was walking around Berkeley, and there's like one of his posters on the thing. I was so happy to see it. And that's what happened for him.
You got to tell me the name.
Michael Franti.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so he and I went to high school together. But when I first saw him on the, on like a telephone pole on University Avenue, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the real deal,
Yeah,
but I mean, it's hard to imagine what his life would be like if he didn't have this context. And you're right. I mean, it's just it makes something possible. Last year, the theme for the Cathedral was home. And that's what I was trying to get at. It's just that experience that makes this place unique. It makes it special. It makes new things possible. You may not even have known in yourself.
Oakland definitely has that. Hieroglyphics, which is a well-known hip-hop group, they have a festival every year, and it started in a warehouse, and then now it's expanded to where it takes up a couple of city blocks, underused area of West Oakland. But it's beautiful. Just, there's hip hop on this stage and on this stage, and all different types of people walking through the festival. But then there's a little arts corner where you're seeing what people can do with a paint can, just how their forms and shapes with paint cans. It's amazing the control that they have with that, and they're just doing it all nonchalant, bopping their heads. But that's true artistry, where they're just, I'm painting live, and here's something I did. Do you want it? Fine.
Yeah. Well, going to Burning Man for me from the suburbs, it was just like totally blew my mind. I mean, just what people were doing, what they're creating, and just in terms of their costume, in terms of the art installations. I mean, it really made me see a much bigger range of possibility than I saw before that. And you're right. Oakland it's got that energy and that vibrancy, and I'm just grateful that there's someone like you who appreciates it and who can articulate it too. So that, because you're right. I mean, we can have this greatness, and you just don't even recognize it until it moves away to Copenhagen.
Exactly.
I'm thinking so much about you this week that there's so much. I mean, the media was in the media this week,
Yes.
and so with Donald Trump's very aggressive language about the untrustworthiness of the media, and then restricting that special little gaggle press conference. And I was thinking so much about you, and I don't know what it feels like. Sometimes when, the Christian church does some stupid things, and when it does, I feel it hurts for me, and I feel people's anger about it. And I just was wondering how this was for you this week, just having so many negative comments about your life's work. Did it make you say, I'm just going to roll up my sleeves and I'm just even that better, or how was it like for you this week?
So. To me, it's the new normal.
Yeah, it is the new normal.
Which I've come to grips with, but I also know that every attack against the media means like twofold. It's going to come back. That just makes people want to dig more. I ran into that a little bit earlier this week. So the fire chief has been embattled since the ghost ship.
Yeah.
Obviously, 36 people died. It's understandable. She went on leave, and for several weeks. Now, this is a time, I feel, where we should be trying to come up with solutions. How can fire and police work closely together to
exactly.
ensure, just fire safety prevention? The city, their policies, they're not going to comment on whether, someone's on leave or not. I heard that the chief was back in the office, and the city still wouldn't comment about whether she was back in office or not. My position is that the public has a right to know, and I don't mind calling you, 10 times in one day, which one city PR guy just got kind of frustrated and stopped answering my emails and phone calls. But when it comes to someone targeting the media as an enemy of the people,
Right, exactly.
that's wrong.
Yeah.
We're not malicious. Most of us aren't malicious. We're just trying to get the facts. And when we go to a source to get the facts and you don't give them to us, that means we have to go to other sources. And some of those sources are anonymous. But in this climate, the journalists I work with, we are vigilant about the stories we're reporting, but also the accuracy of the stories.
Yeah.
And so I took it as, well, okay, this is another, we'll let you have your points, but it's coming. The stories are still going to come. They're, on my way over here, I'm reading stories about new leaks. And I think that's one thing the president is running into. He's realizing that he can't control Washington press corps the same way he did tabloid media in New York.
Yeah.
It's different beasts, and I think he's struggling with that, along with his nonsensical policy decisions and his executive orders, which don't make any sense really, and they go against what the office is supposed to stand for.
Yeah.
And that's what the media is doing, trying to uphold him to the standard of the previous presidents.
Yeah, Yeah. Farhad Manjoo wrote that article in the New York Times this week about trying to ignore Trump coverage for a week, and just it was impossible. That's no surprise to anybody. And what he wrote about was a study that was done by Microsoft scientists on music downloads. So they had the control experiment was 50% of the people did music, and then the 50% who knew how many people downloaded. How convincing are those kinds of articles for you? Is like there is something different technologically that seems to make Donald Trump possible in a way that it's just hard to imagine Donald Trump getting elected in 2005, 1995, 1985, 1975. So what is it about just like the technology that is part of what makes this possible, and what do we have to look forward to in the future?
Oh, that's a loaded question.
It is a tough one. I mean, you're right. I mean, if you have the answer to that, then...
Well, what made him possible, I believe, was he tapped into a sense of entitlement from areas where I'm from. So I moved here from the South. And so his constituency is feeling entitled to some sense of prosperity. And they see that over the last 8 years, government has trended towards, some sense of equality. Let's put this base here. Let's try to take healthcare, for example. Let's try to ensure millions of Americans who had no access to healthcare. Not that the government's saying you have to do this, but here is, because what insurance is you don't know when you'll need it.
Right.
There could be a catastrophic expense that you can avoid by having health insurance. And so he tapped into that sense of entitlement that people have been forgotten. And what I find funny is that the same people that support that message haven't realized that there's been people that have been passed on for centuries in this country.
Right, exactly.
And that's where it doesn't make sense. But he tapped into an electorate that was frustrated about their position in life. And he used TV, not print, TV. You give him all this free advertising. You gave him a pulpit. You gave him this he didn't have to pay for it, so it was untapped.
Yeah.
And so he's on 24-hour news cycle.
24 hours.
Anything he says, and once he realized that he was bulletproof, he'll still get the votes.
Right, he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue.
Exactly. He can say anything he wanted to. So he attacked the family, the Cons.
John Lewis.
He attacked John McCain. He said whatever he wanted, and he was still rewarded. And that's what he's finding is difficult right now, because he's not campaigning right now. He's governing.
Right.
And I think he's really having second thoughts now, because it's not as easy as he thought. Once I win, then I can just do what I want. But no, the checks are there. But I think the media, specifically cable news, needs to reconsider just airing Donald Trump rallies.
Yeah.
Because that's what they are. They're rallies. They're not moving towards any greater good.
Right.
They're settling scores, and they're rallying a base that doesn't want to work with anyone else, who doesn't believe that they're entitled, that they should have more than anyone else. And we're seeing that with immigration. Anytime I write about immigration, my inbox just...
Oh, I can imagine. I was going to ask you about
overflows.
that. It just seems, that's the other part. It's like two parts this week. One is the immigration part, and the other is the press part. And I see it here. Even at the Cathedral, we have people who are so afraid that there's going to be a knock on the door. We have meetings in the Cathedral to talk about what happens if the immigration authorities come into the Cathedral. How are you seeing this terrible stress and strain affecting families and people in Oakland?
Yeah, can you just imagine this, that you're a family and you're working low-paying jobs, and you're trying to survive as rents are escalating.
Yeah.
And landlords are getting wise to that, and they're trying to kick you out or find any reason to evict you. Now, you don't want to go to court to fight this, because, hey, you might get deported.
Right.
So you try to find another place to live, and after doing that once or twice, you're homeless, because you can't afford your first month's rent plus deposit.
Right.
And so,
And then every time you walk out the door, you don't know whether you're going to see your children again.
exactly, and you're having to come up with contingency plans for your
Yeah,
kids. And then you're not sending your kids to school
Yeah.
because you don't want them taken away from you. The fear is real, and I think it's creeping into people who need to do their part to ensure that it doesn't happen because they have voices. But in Contra Costa County, for example, there's a ICE detention facility. So you have activists really up in arms with the sheriff having a contract with Immigration and Customs Enforcement to run that jail. Well, the sheriff says, hey, look, my deputies aren't going out and rounding up people. We're not racially profiling immigrants to see if they have papers.
Yeah.
That's his standpoint. But the community's like, but you're still running this facility for the agents that do round up people, that do profile,
exactly.
and you're still running this facility. So there's this powder keg of emotions going on out there because the reality is, yes, there are people just getting rounded up
Right.
and put into this facility.
Yeah.
And while West County, it's called West County in Richmond, where there is a facility, lawyers, immigration lawyers actually they have access to those. But Yuba City, and there's another one in California where they don't have access. I mean, your people are taken away from you, and you're 3 hours away, zero contact.
Yeah.
I mean, that's unimaginable
That's
to me.
unimaginable to me.
But
Yeah, it's just like what?
why is it not possible?
Yeah, yeah. Do you see what are the possibilities? I have a friend who's so upset about this issue. And he's been telling me this for the last 4 months. And we have another friend in common who's like, oh, don't worry so much. And everything he's foreseen is coming to pass. And I just wonder, how much worse is it going to get? What are we going to see, in the immediate future as these deportations increase?
Oh, well, they're going to start construction on the wall. I read today that they're accepting plans through March 10th, and they're going to try to make a final decision on April 10th. Wow. And granted, so you think, well, hey, this is going to help with immigration, but guess who's going to pay for it?
Right, exactly.
It's us.
Yeah.
It is the same people who voted for this wall, they're going to have to pay for it too. And that wall is going to be $25 billion. Just the other day, the president took credit for the national debt lowering.
Right. That was insane. I just totally didn't understand
But
that.
it's about to explode with all these infrastructure projects with no way to pay for them.
Yeah. And no benefit to humanity.
None whatsoever. So essentially, you're going to build a wall that's just going to have to be deconstructed in 8 years,
Yeah.
4 years, or you're going to start and we're going to have a skeleton in 4 years to take it down.
Yeah.
It's truly symbolic at this point, but the cost is going to be to the people that he said he's going to benefit. Where does this go? I mean, I can see a future where the Constitution doesn't exist. I can see where, we have this dictatorship. Hey, I'm, supreme leader, I'm in power, and we're going to make it into a monarchy. Why not? Why not everyone has to have a photo of me in their living room?
Right, exactly.
We're dealing with an egomaniac who has control of government, and people who are sworn to work for their constituency aren't standing up to that. It's because they want to roll back health care.
Yeah.
They want to rewrite the tax code to benefit the people who are rich.
Yeah.
And that's a little scary because the longer this goes on, the longer these people stay in office and normalizing this kind of behavior, the easier it's going to get to just push anything through. And then, I think journalists could be targeted.
Yeah.
I think journalists could be jailed eventually because they're the ones that are out there trying to gather information.
Well, the rhetoric is just so incendiary against journalists. Like I said, it's just your mom must watch the news and just worry about the two of you.
Oh, and she doesn't so I have this thing where if I mention the president in my column, I take a swipe at him. Let's just call it what it is. So I've taken to calling him Cowboy Dan. In recent weeks, I've called him a bag of wind. Made fun of his hair, obviously. But she's worried because she'll read some of the commenters, and she's like, "Oh, those people are being nasty. Are you worried? Are you scared? Maybe you should, back off a little bit." But I tell her, she believes that God has a path for everyone.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, if you believe that, Mom, then you understand that I feel that I was placed right here for this moment. And then she understands that. So
I understand that too, actually. I mean, it's funny. I preach about that today. It's just there's a way in which when you can kind of get beyond that fear of death and fear, and really be on that path. There's something just really freeing about it. It's almost like you could see it in your writing too. I mean, there is a kind of freedom that you have. I was like, I wish I could say stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, I've also been fortunate. So my parents made the decision to have me be the first in our family to graduate from college.
Yeah.
So they put me on a path early on, private school, and then when we moved to the South, it was to, I got to say, it was to a white area with a good school, good public schools. And so this is my way of giving back. And for the people who didn't have the same opportunities that I have, I mean, I've got to speak my mind because of their sacrifices. And so this is my way of sacrificing some of my armor, because I take shots. There's
well, that's what my son says like, Dad, don't read the comments on your stuff. He's just like, don't do it. And it's almost like when you're talking about your mom, I was like, yeah, and there's something about him being in my generation that's responsible to read the comments. But he says, just don't do it.
No, I do, because sometimes you learn something. There's someone who commented rather frequently on my stuff early on, and now we've moved to email. But at first, we were so far apart. I was a racist, and I was just trying to destroy white people. That's what I got from him. But now we're like here, and now we're talking about each other, our family history, and our beliefs, and we're realizing that we're not as far apart as
that's what I believe.
thought,
I think every human being, there's so much more that we have in common than what separates us. And there's a tendency to focus on what separates us, but we share so much in common.
Yeah, I definitely agree. But then there's some people you can't argue with. There was so I do needle. Oh man, I'm not going to tell you what my folders call where all these emails go, but I do needle some people. Yeah. And there's one guy who, and I rarely get upset, but there's one guy.
Well, that's what I think so great. You have that sense of self. I do get upset. I read the comments. I'm like, oh my God.
I don't get upset. It's actually entertaining. And then when I get to needle supporters, but this one guy, he invoked Dylan Roof.
Wow.
So Dylan Roof killed 9 people
I know.
in 2015.
Yeah, exactly. In your own...
in a church in Charleston.
Completely.
And I was like, why go there?
Yeah.
That's the first time I've been mad since I started this job. I was just incensed because why would you invoke that? And it's like, that's where you draw the line. I understand you're trying to make your point, but you're talking about a white supremacist who walked into a black church and prayed with people and then shot them.
Yeah.
Like,
it seems to show absolutely no remorse about it at all.
Exactly. And just last week, I believe there was another South Carolinian was working on a plan to kill some people, and FBI thwarted that one, thankfully. Yeah. But that's where I drew the line. It's like, you're talking about shooting people, and that's where it can go.
Right.
I mean, you think Trump a couple years ago wasn't a possibility. Right.
Now that he was a reality television guy.
Now that he is, we've got to widen our scope of what is possible. Yeah. And that just reminded me that there are some people out there who think it's okay to shoot people because they disagree with them or they don't like them because of their ethnicity. We just saw that in Kansas.
Right, exactly.
I mean, how many more times does that have to happen before the administration says, whoa,
Yeah,
this
right.
kind of terrorism
Exactly.
is what I should be focusing on,
Completely.
instead of worrying about immigrants and people coming from other countries
Yeah.
coming to, because our problems are internal, and it seems like we're locking ourselves into this border where it's just going to be open
It's just like
season.
a pressure cooker
Yeah.
on anybody who seems different.
Exactly.
You know, have written a little bit about the experience of Muslims in Northern California, and I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what it was like to get to know them, and just kind of if you have any suggestions for what the broader religious community can do in particular to support religious minorities.
Well, so I went to a comedy show, and it was titled "On Behalf of All Muslims," and it was at a Muslim cultural center. And they had coffee, they had tea, they had cookies, they had carrots, they had celery, they had chairs, and people laughed.
Yeah.
And the headline comic kept saying, like, "Whoa, you're in a mosque. Are you guys okay?" And people, are uncomfortable, but, kind of laughing. The thing is that go
Yeah,
talk
check it
to
out.
someone.
Yeah.
Go to a place that you've never been. Because you don't know what you'll find. I'll share an example. Grace Cathedral, actually.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite bands, Red House Painters.
Oh yeah.
They have a song called Grace Cathedral
Right. Exactly.
Park.
Completely.
So I moved here, and one of my first times venturing out in the city by myself, I came to Grace
Oh, that's
Cathedral.
awesome.
So it's like, it was a place to come to because this song meant so much to me, and I wanted to know why this artist chose this place to talk about this longing for love,
Right,
and
right.
what he found in this park. And so,
Yeah.
you just go experience it, because you'll realize that, these Muslims, they're funny. They have humor, but they're willing to discuss their faith.
Yeah.
And that's what I've learned from a lot of Muslims that I've been friends with, is that questions about their faith, they don't mind answering.
Yeah.
And it's the attacks. And some of the most deepest discussions. Now, there's some of the Muslims that I've been associating with since the Muslim ban, well, let's call it what it is, they're afraid.
Yeah,
So I talked to some
exactly.
folks after the comedy show about how, they're wondering if they should increase security, even in Oakland,
Right.
which is a very tolerant city. They're
Yeah.
wondering if they should have a patrol here,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
some ritzy neighborhood. And
Right.
that to me is scary. But then you think about it, like, I'm in this place. What if something happens here? Well, should I be here? And that's, to me, is too much, because I shouldn't have to worry about going into a place and just experiencing what it has to offer, the culture it has to offer. I mean, people shouldn't be worried about going to church.
Oh yeah, completely.
And,
We have that conversation all the time.
and hearing a message.
Exactly.
If they
Gathering
want that.
together. Exactly.
Yeah.
Your writing, as I mentioned, it's so vivid. I
thank
wonder,
you.
what did you learn? What was the best piece of writing advice that you had? How did your voice evolve? I mean,
So, I used to be a writer that tried to hammer a point, that I wanted to be right,
Yeah.
and that I had to be smarter, or be more well researched than anyone else. But then I had this guy who who's a new editor at this newspaper, and one of the first stories that I submitted, for him to edit, he just marked it all up, and he's like, we should talk about this. So after 10 minutes of talking about it, and he's like, I think you should just try again.
start over. Oh,
I was
I hate
whoa,
that. I put 40 hours of work into
yeah,
that.
you're like, do you know who I am? This is
Yeah.
not supposed to happen. And then he just told me, he's like, just take us there. And I was like, okay, cool. And so I tried that, and then I remember the time where I got it. So I went to a country music concert, and instead of writing about the music, this is when I was an arts critic, instead of writing about the music, I wrote about the people that came there.
Wow.
And I wrote about this guy's buckle, and I call it like a bagel-sized buckle, and just went through his outfit, and some other people were there, and I had an editor come by, and she was like, I saw it. I was like, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So since then, everything I write, whether it's a feature story or news story, I try to bring people along,
Right.
and give them a sense of what I'm seeing, because I think if you can take people there and allow them to, at least sit down and see your vantage point, maybe they will understand what you're writing about more, or at least see it from a different perspective than their own. And
I love that. I mean, it's funny because I'm the same way. I'll just like do immense amount of research and have pages and pages of notes.
Yeah.
And you're right. Sometimes it's just like the Bart story I mentioned. It's just like you took people there to the teenager peeling back the seat cushion, and and that's great advice. I think I look at Oakland too, and I've been thinking a little bit about just the professional sports scene there, and I just didn't know if you'd had a chance to kind of get into that yet or not, but I know a lot of people are asking questions about just what are the future for the Warriors and
the Warriors are coming
Raiders.
over here.
I know they are. So what are people talking about?
So
there?
I'm an A's fan.
Yeah,
But it's a terrible stadium.
it is.
So I go to AT&T Park more than I go to the A's play, because the park,
that is the most. I was when it was on a bond, so they had to. It was on the election, like you had to vote for it. So my wife voted in favor of it, and I voted against it.
Oof.
And every time I walk in the door, I feel guilty. I canceled her vote out because the place is beautiful.
It's
right.
gorgeous. I like to steal away in the afternoons.
Oh, yeah.
Go watch like the first 5 innings, take a nap, and then watch the end of the game.
Yeah, completely.
And no, it's one of my favorite places to nap in the city.
It's so comfortable.
But the Raiders, so that is huge.
That is huge
right now in
What's
Oakland.
going to happen?
Nothing's going to happen. You can't build that stadium.
Yeah.
You cannot put the taxpayers on the line to pay for a team that plays 8 games at most.
Exactly.
Right now
Yeah.
at home.
Right.
It would be a career ender for the mayor, I believe, if she, because Oakland is having enough trouble right now. It can't afford what it has to pay now. I mean, we're still paying, I think, $90-some million on the stadium addition when we built, when we brought the Raiders back.
Right.
And so the Raiders, look, they can go play in Santa Clara.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a stadium here that San Francisco's
Right, exactly.
49ers aren't filling to capacity.
Yeah.
Like, let them go play together. Like, the Raiders had a great season, and I think they're part of the cultural fabric of Oakland. But I don't think it should be at the expense of residents who are already taxed so highly.
So
right
you
now.
voted with me.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't think public funds should be.
That's the way I felt.
Should be
I think,
spent
about it.
on
Private
sporting teams.
sporting teams.
Well, because they make so much
Exactly,
money,
that's
and
exactly
so those
right.
profits aren't put right
Roll
back into the community.
Yeah, if the community owned the Raiders, it would be a very different thing for me.
Yeah.
I mean, if someone made the argument that it was an investment really in the community's own future.
I think private funds should be used for stadiums because communities never get the investment that owners claim.
Yeah.
And furthermore, ownership of the Raiders tried to strong arm Oakland into agreeing to pay for it, and then took a deal in Las Vegas that fell apart.
Yeah.
And now they're back here.
Right,
and it's
right.
like, no, you can't do that. There's no way $750 million can be used. And furthermore, Oakland was going to pass a resolution about how much it would contribute, and had no idea where hundreds of millions of dollars were going to materialize to contribute to that, which is ridiculous to
It is
me.
ridiculous.
Yeah, I have some problems with government over in Oakland because we are over leveraged and need to scale it back and think about homeless.
Right.
We need to think about how do we encourage developers to increase the housing stock.
Yeah.
That's things we need instead of a football team that maybe 8 Sundays a year, and until Tom Brady retires, you're not going to host a playoff game.
Yeah,
So,
right.
it's
right, completely.
Yeah, the AFC. Yeah, I don't get it.
Yeah. You mentioned just kind of like the governance issues in Oakland. I mean, I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that. Like, what are some of the main challenges that Oakland faces? And I mean, there's so many women in positions of leadership too. That seems like it's a unique story, and I wonder what that means also.
So I wrote about that because I was really encouraged by the Women's March.
Yeah, I read that article.
That
was a good one.
I mean, there were 100,000 people
exactly.
in Oakland alone. That's
Yeah.
not including Walnut Creek and other places
San Francisco.
in Richmond.
Yeah, Richmond.
This is in Oakland, and it was so peaceful. Yes, it was during the day, but it was. At one point, I was just standing on Broadway, just for 30 minutes, and the people just kept coming, and not doing anything, just watching. Not taking pictures, just being in awe of the crowd. And so it inspired me to look at Oakland's leadership and then realize that Oakland is really led by women.
Yeah.
And that's wonderful. And I think the mayor is doing some wonderful things. I think the new police chief, who's a female, is going to do some wonderful things, or at least take a sober approach to policing and a transparent approach. That's what I think she's going to bring to the table. Now, as far as governing, we have an issue with city council. One of my points that I really have a problem with is pot permits and ensuring equity.
I wanted to ask about that too.
Yeah, so we have, unless the federal government tries to roll back.
Well, that's what I was wondering. That's an amazing thing too. I mean, so we voted to legalize, and I just haven't heard anything about how that's going to happen or what's, and I think it'll have mean something for Oakland.
Well, of course, because you have a multi-billion-dollar industry, and you're going to have all these funds at your disposal to do good with.
Right.
But in Oakland, we're holding it up on pot permits. So we have one councilwoman who means well. She wants to ensure equity, meaning the black and brown people who have been unfairly targeted for marijuana arrests.
Exactly.
She wants those people to have equity.
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah.
But she wants it to be a 1-to-1 ratio as far as disseminating permits. So equity permit, regular permit. And if you don't have another equity permit, you can't have another regular permit.
Oh, wow.
So you're going to have a log jam of all these companies that want permits until you find an equity permit. And so now they're going to San Leandro, they're going to Richmond.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, it's just like San Leandro and Richmond are Oakland. I mean, it's...
Yes, they're even going to Lafayette, Vallejo, to open up these businesses where all that revenue would be in Oakland.
Yeah.
My contention is, yes, there needs to be an equity component, but I don't think there should be a logjam here because these businesses want to provide jobs.
Yeah.
They want to continue this revitalization of downtown Oakland. They want to open grow houses. This is all going to be taxable dollars here, which you can funnel back into the system. And I just feel that we're going to miss the boat. And all these companies, I've talked to several companies that have already packed up and moved.
Yeah.
Richmond passed an ordinance that, they're going to have a whole area for all these businesses, warehouse, if you want to also have shops there. And, guess what? It's going to be an economic hub because people are going to go there. I mean, Richmond's only like 15 minutes away.
Oh, yeah, completely.
I can take Bart there.
Yeah, exactly. Ride your bike.
Yes, exactly, yes. So I don't see how Oakland, if it doesn't get the permitting straight, because by January 2018 you have to have it settled.
Yeah.
And I think the process takes several months to complete. So I think if it's not done by March, you're going to see a lot of businesses that are already entrenched in Oakland uproot, and then you're going to have all this space. You're going to have a void in taxable dollars.
I've been totally thinking about that, just because, like I said, I haven't heard enough about it. We have a tradition at the forum, and what we do is people write questions on note cards, and then they give them up. Okay. So if you have questions for Otis, then Rebecca will collect them. it's
They're
to
not
ask
for
good
us.
questions. I just feel like I've
not
been
for both of us.
monopolizing you. I've been just thinking so much about. Yeah, I loved living in Oakland, and I lived in kind of like the Berkeley line for 7 years. I lived there, and I like the vibrancy of the culture and just like the feeling of the place. I wonder, if you see like signs of things changing in terms of just like policing or in terms of just like the way that the urban landscape is laid out. What do we have to look forward to in Oakland? What are we hoping for the future? And what do you see as some changes that are happening? I mean, I remember like when the infant mortality rate was just like the highest in the country. And, I mean, it was just this funny place where it just had this vibrant culture and then pretty intense poverty and violence too. My wife worked at Castlemont High School for a while. And,
I think we'll see Castlemont changing because they have a new program where you graduate, you get money for college.
Oh,
which
those students, I felt like the deck was stacked against them.
Oh, well, it definitely is. And I think right now we're seeing through the mayor's initiatives, but also through community leaders realizing that, this tech boom is encroaching into Oakland.
Yeah, it definitely is.
And it could hop over all these people unless you plug into it. And I think we're seeing that. We're seeing more programs built around tech and actually getting people who are disadvantaged plugged into earlier. There's one program, Hack the Hood, that I really like because it's really introducing young children to the possibilities that are available to them.
Great.
Because that's what you find in a lot of communities where you have poverty, where you have a lot of violence. Their sense of the world is confined to their neighborhood.
Yeah.
They don't realize, like you or I, that there's this world of possibilities out here.
When Bill Russell, the famous basketball player, was growing up in Oakland, he never crossed the bridge to San Francisco until he went to college at USF.
Yes, I talked to, when I was focusing on renters in Richmond who were getting evicted, and that's something else, is we're going to see a lot more evictions happening in the East Bay. I met a man who grew up in San Francisco with O.J. Simpson.
Oh yeah, right.
But
Potrero Hill.
Yeah, but that was their world. They didn't venture.
Never went beyond it.
To the sunset. They didn't venture to the mission. Like that was their world, and that's how they grew up and lived. But now, I can't imagine that not realizing that. Yeah, hey, you can go to college, and so Castlemont, like, hey, these kids when they announced that there's money for them, they were ecstatic.
Oh, that's great.
Because a lot of children know that they need opportunity, and opportunity comes with money. And if you have no money, then you're stuck.
Yeah, right. So it's hard to even have the incentive to do well in high school if you feel like you just have nowhere to go afterwards. We have a stack of questions.
Oh.
Oh my gosh, this person's handwriting is terrible.
I saw it. It was
like, okay, let's gonna try it here. Okay, I can't read it. Okay, you write on a. Okay, that's okay. Any thoughts on the idea that the Republican Congress will separate themselves from Trump's agenda out of sense of self-preservation?
No.
That's a quick one.
No, because they're aligned with his agenda because of self-preservation.
Right. They have too much at stake to be able to no matter how far he goes.
And they won't change until some of their contemporaries are voted out of office. That's what happened.
Yeah.
So what the Tea Party did 2 years after Obama was elected, the liberals need to do to change any, because the Republicans feel they're protected. They have the Senate, they have Congress, and they have the White House. And they're under the belief that the American people voted for this, which anyone who can be reasoned with will realize that he didn't win the popular vote. So you can't claim the American people voted for this. The Electoral College, yes, not the American people.
Yeah. Any thoughts on the idea that, Given your history with the African-American astronaut McNair, can you comment on the book and movie Hidden Figures?
Oh, yes. So,
My wife loved that movie.
yeah, I thought that was a quality film.
Yeah.
And it's really ticking me off that when we're talking about tonight, was tonight
Right,
Sunday?
I think
Oscars.
it is. It's right.
People are talking about La La Land
Yeah.
and not Hidden Figures or Moonlight. But Hidden
Moonlight
Figures,
was amazing.
I saw that film 3 times.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
it never gets old because it's so
It
well
has
done.
like a few days after I had an almost more powerful response to it. Like a few days later.
Yeah.
That
The
was an
pacing is
amazing
great.
Film.
Third time was just as good. But Hidden Figures, I thought was so well done because it took, what they were doing, mathematical equations, and really captured why they were able to do it. And it's because the emotional quotient.
Yeah.
Like, they appealed to the reason at NASA that I can't do what you want me to do if you're hindering me from doing this,
right.
which, the bathroom. You have to run a mile to use the bathroom. And not only are you female, but you're black.
Yeah.
But what these women did were showed that, I'm a person. I'm not a female. I'm not black. I am a person, and I can do this math as well as anyone, as well as these white men. It also showed that there continues to be a barrier between the rest of humanity and white males who refuse to allow people to come through. Right. And that's what I found. I was talking to someone last night. That's what I find in a lot of the commenting when I talk about race.
Yeah.
I get a lot of venom from white males, and I'm just like, I'm just trying to have a conversation here with you. But then...
And just talk about how things really are. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just like it's no surprise that the great basketball players in the NBA are tall.
Yes, yes.
Do you know what I mean? It's just like, and if you said, all those tall people in the NBA, and I can't imagine them writing letters to you and saying, hey, I got here not because of my tallness,
Yes.
but because of my hard work. I shot free throws every night.
Yes, exactly. There's, one person under 6 feet who was an all-star this year?
Yeah, completely.
Yeah, it's height.
And in whiteness, there are so many benefits for...
Exactly, and that's all I wanted to discuss, that you've enjoyed this, and we're just trying to level the playing field. That's all it is. No one is trying to attack
So our
you.
grandparents were enslaved. I mean, that's when slavery, wasn't it? I mean, it's like living memory. I mean, you remember what your grandparents were like, and they remember what their grandparents were like, and that's how close it is.
No, it's very close. I mean, I have a grandparent who, colluded with my parents to make sure that they could afford the private school.
Yeah, right.
So that we could start with a base.
Yeah.
Not in public school where we lived, because that's where my mom went to school, and she got through, a year of community college. It was the baseline, and they had to pool the money so we could go to a school where, we'd get the quality education. So yeah, that's all I'm talking about. And I'm not trying to say anyone should have more than anyone, but we just gotta...
Yeah, and just like I said, being honest about where all this good comes from. Okay, here's a good one. Thank you for your voice and your reporting. Do you have any items for people in pink hats in our democracy? I don't know what that means. Thank you for your voice and for reporting. Do you have any action items?
Yes.
I see.
Yes.
To-do list.
Yes.
To-do list for the people in the Women's March.
So I get asked that all the time, and I think that there are groups, Surge, SURJ, supporting, I think it's universal racial justice. Don't quote me on that, but the Surge, SURJ, that is the acronym. ACLU, definitely. The ACLU this is its moment right now. It is going to be incredibly important. And then I would also encourage anyone to experience another culture. I'm talking about from Muslim Cultural Center. I'm talking about a soul food restaurant. I'm talking about arts, a play. I'm talking about movies, Hidden Figures. Hidden Figures is a great example of that. And Moonlight is a great example of here is
An entry
how
point
other
into
people
it. Yeah,
live.
exactly.
Here's how other people experience life. I can't say enough about how much arts are really meaningful. And there's artists like Chance the Rapper you mentioned, who people think hip hop is one thing, but this guy comes at hip hop from a very deeply religious perspective.
true.
He has a song called "How Great Thou
Oh, I
Art"
know,
that is
Micah.
just
Exactly.
It's church.
It is church.
It is
church.
It is church, but
Yeah.
in a different way of placing. Man, that song, oh my gosh, that choir at the beginning
I
of
know,
it.
it's just so powerful. I mean, that's what my son's like, Dad, you got to hear this.
And
I
it's
mean,
about God.
it's
This
about
is
God.
popular hip hop
Completely.
about God. It's
Yeah.
it crosses bound. That's what, because you don't have to be religious to really feel that music.
Yeah.
And
By the way, I'd love you to write an article about that. Just like to plant a seed. I have no idea how you write articles or how you get the ideas or if your editor tells you go do this or, but I would love to see what
I
you
would,
did there.
I would like to slip that in. I was thinking about it because he's coming on tour.
Yeah.
But I have a radio show that I do for a community station out in Oakland, and that's one of the songs I played on my first show. And it's kind of long because there's that choir interlude, but I just had to because this is representative of Chance the Rapper, and So please experience art primarily because I think we can say one thing about institutional segregation, but then, we have the freedom to flow between
completely.
cultures.
Right, yeah.
And I think we self-segregate a lot.
Yeah, we do.
And I think that's what's missing because I was speaking to a friend who said that, her feelings were that, people of color have to interact with the white world, but the white world doesn't have to see how we're living. So then when you think about it, when you're talking about immigration, you're thinking, oh, we're going to deport the immigrants, the illegals, they're here illegal.
Right.
But you're not thinking about, hey, they have families just like you.
Exactly.
They work a job just like you.
Right.
They are struggling, maybe not like you, but they're not here, all are not here committing crimes.
Yeah.
And that's the basis of my reporting, is that I want to show people that
That's
we all
right.
have a link.
That's
We're-
exactly right. In a way, it's a window into all these different worlds. Maybe it's a professional basketball player, or maybe it's about art, or maybe it's about politics in Oakland. But they're windows. Like, we can't go and meet the mayor of Oakland. The fire chief doesn't take our phone calls either.
Yeah.
So we do find out about it through your writing. I have to go because I've got to go preach a sermon.
Oh, we do?
But we have
Oh,
one more. I know. I wish I could stay here all morning. I'm going to read one more question, and this is a tough one. Since the election, I have felt that nothing will change substantially until, quote unquote, our nation and Trump's supporters can really have some exchange with each other and find what we do have in common. Do you have any suggestions on how to do that? If you do, I think.
Yeah, so one thing with Trump supporters, you have to get through the misspelled words if you're doing email correspondence, and all these words, random words capitalized, and all exclamation points. You have to get through that. But patience. And this is one-on-one with people. Not with the government, but patience with people. It is our duty, I call us the enlightened ones, to have patience with people, to help them, to find out where you need to meet them, and then to have a conversation. Because the first 5 minutes or the first 30 emails is them yelling, and you just let them yell. It's like a kid. Just let them, like,
Well, it's like
get
you were
that
saying about
out.
your comment section. And
Yeah,
the
just
emails.
let them get it out, and then
Yeah.
say, hey, so can we try this without the insults? Oh, okay, sorry. Most people be like, sorry, I was just a little upset about what you wrote. Okay, well, let me share you from my perspective. There was this one gentleman who I actually met him on a street, and he was like, I like how you write, but I think you're wrong. And I was like, well, what am I wrong about? And he's like, well, you're talking about the effects of slavery, and you're just wrong, where segregation was so long ago. I was like, well, how long ago was it? And he was like, well, it was in the 60s. And I was like, okay. And then I was like, what happened after the 60s? I was like, you had institutionalized redlining where people couldn't have access to healthcare, they couldn't have access to loans, and people were segregated by neighborhoods where you had separate but equal schools. And it took 20, 30 years for integration happen in some parts of the country. So I was like, so you're telling me these areas that have funding for their schools, where they have textbooks, where they have outlets for arts enrichment, weren't better off for these places where you have poverty and crime and they're cordoned off by these invisible red lines? Okay, well, when you put it that way, it's like, well, that's all I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to say I'm not trying to cause an argument. I just have to have you understand my point of view. And I'm not going to let you silence me because you feel that I'm just trying to race bait. No, I'm just trying to tell you how things are out there.
Yeah, yeah. I'm so grateful for you coming.
Oh, thank you.
Like I said, I learned so much from you. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me. This has been fun.
Next time I look at the comments section, I'm going to be thinking of you.
Oh, man.
What I love about you get that sense of self that's okay, and then you're
man, comment section tomorrow, I'm not going to tell you guys what's coming, but it's.
Well, that's good. I'm
sure there's going to be some people upset with me, but yeah.
So we have church at 11 o'clock. We depend on your support to make the forum happen, so you can make a gift into the special donation box. And I'm going to be out of town for the next 2 weeks. Willie Brown will be our guest after that. Have you had a chance to meet him yet?
I haven't had a chance to meet him.
Man, you're in for a great treat. Actually, he could just sit here and just not have me say anything and just do the whole thing without me.
Yeah, but he's got. Well, I'm going to be running into him
soon
because I'm working on a project that it's going to require some of his thoughts.
That's
so
good.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming, everyone.
Thank you.